This is a bloodworm. And honestly, it might be one of the creepiest and most disgusting creatures I've ever seen. Flushed face. It has a mouth that can literally shoot out of its body, and at the end of it are 4 venomous fangs, 1 in each corner. Yeah, this is definitely not something you'd ever want to get bitten by. Now, if you know me, I'm known for keeping some of the weirdest pets imaginable. So naturally, I went online and found a website that actually sells these things. Not as pets, but as live bait for fishing. Yeah. Nobody buys these as pets, which means I might actually be one of the first people ever to try and keep bloodworms in an aquarium. And that also means we're about to discover some insane abilities that most people have never seen before. So after placing the order, a few days later, package finally arrived at my house. Package. And inside were the bloodworms. Alright, here we go. Even as someone who works with animals all the time, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous opening this. Grinning face with sweat, I carefully opened the box, removed all the packing material, and there they were, a whole container, full of bloodworms. Using some tweezers, I picked one up to get a closer look. And yep, that is officially the most disgusting thing I've seen in a while. His body was slimy, constantly moving, and then suddenly, his mouth shot out, like straight out of its body. And right at the tip, those 4 tiny fangs. These are what they use in the wild to grab onto prey like shrimp, inject venom, and basically drain them. Yeah. Not exactly something you want anywhere near your fingers. But here's the problem. I didn't just buy one. I bought 12 bloodworms. Flushed face. And they all have to live in the same tank. Yeah. This is about to get crazy. Alright. If I'm really going to keep these nightmare creatures as pets, they're going to need a proper home. Grinning face with sweat. So I grabbed a clean aquarium and started building their enclosure from scratch. First, I added a layer of aqua soil mixed with dirt. In the wild, bloodworms live buried in the sand and mud near ocean shores, so I wanted to recreate something similar. Then I added a little bit of water, but instantly, something went wrong. Neutral face. The dirt turned into this weird muddy mess, and the water became completely dark and cloudy. Yeah, not good. So I had to fix it. I drained all the water, took the dirt out, washed everything properly, then added the soil back in again, this time with a thin layer of clean sand on top. After refilling the tank, now the water looked perfectly clear. Much better. Okay, hand. Next, I started decorating the tank. I placed some pieces of wood in the middle to create a natural look. At first, some parts were sticking out too much, so I broke them off and adjusted everything until it looked like a nice, compact structure. Then came the rocks. I added a few different types to make the environment feel more realistic. But the coolest piece I added wasn't even a normal rock. It was petrified wood, which is basically wood that turned into stone over millions of years. Yeah. Pretty insane. Now here's where things get interesting. Smirking face. I had an idea. I grabbed a can of sardines, opened it, and placed one piece of fish under that petrified wood. Why? Because I wanted to test something. Backhand index pointing right. Can bloodworms smell food? Will they be able to detect it, dig through the sand, and find it on their own? We're gonna find out later. After that, I wanted to make the tank look even better. So I tried to add some red aquatic plants to match the whole bloodworm theme. But when I went to the store, there were 0 red plants available. Expressionless face. So instead, I had to order them online. The next day, the plants arrived, and I placed them around the tank. Some were red, some were green, but together they actually looked really nice. To make things even cooler, I added some red crystals on the ground, just to give the tank that extra blood-like vibe. Red circle. Now the setup was starting to look amazing, but I still had something big planned for both sides of the tank. Because this isn't just a normal enclosure. Backhand index pointing right, I'm going to build custom structures for the worms to explore. Alright, now it's time to build something really cool. Smirking face. Because I don't want this tank to just look good. I want it to be interactive for the bloodworms. Snow-capped mountain, the triple-decker cave. On the right side of the tank, I decided to build a custom cave. And not just any cave, a triple-decker cave. Yeah, 3 levels. Flushed face. To make it, I grabbed a few small plastic baskets, cut holes in the front to act as entrances, then sanded down the edges so nothing sharp would hurt the worms. After that, of course, I covered everything in spray foam, grinning squinting face. Because let's be real, it wouldn't be one of my builds without it. Once the foam dried, I carved it to look like natural rock. And finally, the cave was done. It actually looked pretty decent. Not perfect, but hey, it's about the idea, right? Grinning face with sweat. I placed it inside the tank, and now the worms had a place to hide, explore, and move around. Meat on bone, the food testing station. Now for the left side, this is where things get really interesting. Because I built a food testing area. Basically, I wanted to test, backhand index pointing right, what do bloodworms actually like to eat the most? So I planned to give them multiple food options. To do that, I went shopping cart, straight to the meat and fish section. Here's what I got. Cut of meat beef, because other creatures I've kept loved it. Fish salmon, since it lives in similar environments. Fried shrimp. Google says they love this. Tropical fish pellets. Just to test something random. Yeah, this is going to be a full-on feeding experiment. Back home, I lined up all the food, ready to test each one. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see those venomous fangs in action. Flushed face. But before putting the worms in, there was one huge problem I suddenly realized. Warning, big mistake. I started filling the tank with water. Everything looked fine, until I remembered something very important. Bloodworms don't live in freshwater. They live in the ocean. Water wave, meaning they need salt water. And I had just built a freshwater tank. Neutral face. Yeah, big mistake. Alright, so yeah, I messed up. Grinning face with sweat. Bloodworms need salt water, and I had just filled the entire tank with fresh water. So I quickly drained some of the water out, and luckily, I actually had containers of real ocean water stored in my garage. Water wave. Don't ask why. It just makes life easier sometimes. Grinning squinting face. I started pouring it into the tank, mixing it with the remaining water, until the salt level was just right. After checking everything, perfect. White heavy check mark. Now the environment finally matched what bloodworms need to survive. But there was one more problem. Neutral face. All those plants I bought? Yeah, they were freshwater plants, meaning they were all going to die in salt water. Skull. So instead of removing everything, I came up with a different idea. Red circle, the blood effect. I installed a red light above the tank, and instantly, the entire water turned into this dark, red glow. It looked like actual blood. Flushed face. Honestly, perfect for bloodworms. Snail adding snails. Next, I added a few snails into the tank. These guys help clean algae and keep the tank healthy. They slowly started moving across the glass, getting used to their new home. Now, I'm not 100% sure if the bloodworms will attack them, but hopefully, those shells keep them safe. Grinning face with sweat. Warning, final touch. Before adding the worms, I made one last thing. A warning sign. I printed out a custom sign that said, backhand index pointing right, beware of worm, and placed it next to the tank. Face with tears of joy. Now everything was ready. The tank looked insane. The environment was perfect. There was only one thing left to do. Releasing the first bloodworm. I grabbed one of the worms with tweezers and slowly dropped it into the tank. It sank to the bottom and started moving, wiggling around, exploring its new environment. After a few seconds, it did something interesting. It burrowed into the sand. That's where bloodworms spend most of their time in the wild, hidden, waiting. But after a while, came back out, just slowly swimming and moving again. Now it was time for the real test. Fork and knife with plate, first feeding attempt. I grabbed some fish pellets, and dropped them into the tank. But they just floated. So I used tweezers and moved one close to the worm's mouth. And suddenly, the worm reacted. His mouth shot out, and those tiny fangs appeared. Flushed face. I thought, this is it. It's about to eat. But nothing happened. It just ignored the food. Neutral face. Yeah. Fish pellets equals 0/10. Alright, fish pellets were a complete failure. Neutral face. So next, I moved on to something way more promising. Backhand index pointing right salmon. Fish. This stuff is oily, super smelly, basically perfect for attracting a predator like a bloodworm. To increase my chances, I added 2 more bloodworms into the tank. Now there were 3 of them, all moving around slowly in the water. I grabbed a piece of salmon with tweezers and started moving it right in front of them. Waiting, watching, expecting an attack. But again, nothing. Neutral face. They completely ignored it. At this point, I realized something important. Backhand index pointing right bloodworms don't always keep their mouth open. Their fangs only come out when they're ready to attack. And right now, they were probably still stressed in the new environment. So instead of forcing it, I changed the plan. Hourglass not done letting them settle. I added all 12 bloodworms into the tank. Flushed face. And then, I just left them alone. For a few hours, they burrowed, hit, and slowly got used to their new home. Then, I came back for round 2. Smirking face. Cross swords close-up feeding test. This time, I carefully picked up one worm and placed it on land. After a few seconds, it happened. His mouth shot out, fully extended. And now, you could clearly see the fangs. And here's something insane. Backhand index pointing right, those fangs are made of copper. Yes, actual metal. Bloodworms are the only animals known to have copper teeth, which makes them even crazier. Flushed face. Cut of meat beef test. Now it was time. I brought the worm close to a piece of raw beef. And instantly, collision attack. It snapped onto the meat with all 4 fangs, and didn't let go. Started sucking the juices out, holding on like its life depended on it. Even when I tried shaking it off, it refused to let go. Like, backhand index pointing right. I'm eating this. You're not taking it away. Yeah. That was insane to watch. Fried shrimp test. Next, I tried the final food. Backhand index pointing right shrimp. Same process. Wait for the mouth. Bring the food close. And again.
Symbole de collision instant beat.
Another worm grabbed onto the shrimp and started feeding aggressively. Now multiple worms were eating, and honestly, they looked like tiny monsters. Flushed face. After about an hour, I removed the food. It wasn't easy. They really didn't want to let go. Grinning face with sweat, and you could even see bite marks left behind, with venom still on the surface. Yep, these things are no joke. But I had one last idea, something even more interesting. Smirking face. Alright, after seeing those insane attacks, I had one last idea. Smirking face. I wanted to see, backhand index pointing right, how someone else would react to these creatures. So, I called in my mom, face with tears of joy. She walked in, looked at the tank, and instantly froze. EW, what are those? Confounded face. I told her, backhand index pointing right, they're bloodworms. She leaned in a little closer, and immediately backed up. Those are disgusting. They look like snakes, or leeches, or something. Then I pointed at one of the worms. Look closely at the mouth. She looked, and saw the fangs. Oh my gosh. That is horrible. Fearful face. Yep. Safe to say, she was not a fan. Grinning face with sweat. And honestly, I don't blame her. These things are creepy, venomous, and straight up look like alien creatures. But at the same time, they're also incredibly interesting. We learned that they have copper fangs. They can shoot their mouth out. They prefer real meat over pellets. And they are actually powerful little predators. And now I totally understand why people only use them as fishing bait. Neutral face. Because keeping them as pets, yeah, That's a whole different level. But still, this was one of the craziest experiments I've done so far. So yeah, that's it for the bloodworms. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe for more insane creatures and experiments. Fire. And yeah, I think from now on, I'll keep showing my dog at the end of videos too. Dogface,